Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 72 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me forever is my fellow traveller in the empathic field, or as the Germans may say, Einfühlung, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you, Ken?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here, Rory. A super duper episode. And it's lovely that you started off with the German word for empathy, because that's going to be one of the topics that we cover in episode 72. We're going to be speaking about empathy. What is empathy? How do we see it working within the counseling relationship? What does it do for the client? How can we utilize that as a counselor? Stages in counseling, that is practice matters today. And that's an important one because it comes up again and again in those assignments. Give us a little bit of a flavor, some seasoning of what to expect, Rory.
Right, so I'll just get my seasoning pot out. But it's stages in counselling are really important because it gives us an idea as counsellors what tasks need to be addressed in certain stages of the counselling relationship. We have tasks to do to keep us ethical and to offer the best service to our clients. And I'm going to be speaking about what those tasks are.
Love it. So that's stages in counselling. And then we're going to be closing episode 72 by looking at something that comes up so often. And I know, Rory, when we tutored together, it was often a debate amongst our learners, and that is immediacy. What is immediacy? How do you identify immediacy?
This is, Ken.
Sorry? Hey? This is immediacy.
Yeah.
I was talking about it like that. So that's a really good topic. We're going to be coming to immediacy. But kicking off episode 72 by looking at empathy in counselling. And I just wanted to kind of head this up by saying, these topics are all informed from conversations that happen on our Facebook group, from questions that are asked on our Facebook group. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, get on to Facebook, go to Counselling Tutor, just put it in as a search term. You'll find our group. Come on in. We have thousands and thousands of like-minded learners, counselling students from all around the world. We've got some tutors in there, some counselling tutors. We've even got many qualified therapists who hang out for the CPD and for the richness of the conversations that happen within Counselling Tutors, a spam-free zone. So come and have a look and join us. So speaking about empathy, Rory, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, empathy is different to sympathy. I think a lot of people get it confused initially in training. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone, effectively. And sympathy always comes from your frame of reference. So you can tell when someone's being sympathetic, that must be awful, that must be terrible. And it may not be the case. Empathy is trying the very best you can to understand what the other person's saying as if you were that person, along with the feelings that go with it. That's empathy. We try and get as near as possible to how someone feels and their experience of the world. And there's a name for it in counselling, and it's called frame of reference. We try to get into their picture frame. We don't stay in our picture frame.
It's interesting, and I know that the question is often asked, how do you exercise empathy? How do you practice empathy? Is empathy something that you just naturally have, or is it something you can do exercises for? And if you look at the other skills, like maybe paraphrasing, you can practice paraphrasing, and that can be kind of marked, and you can get feedback on that. But empathy is something that happens within. And Rory used to have, when you were tutoring, I remember the words, and I know it's not your saying, but it is a saying that's out there, and it is that empathy is like walking in the client's shoes, that you're walking in their shoes, trying to see it as they see it. However, for safety reasons, what do you need to do, Rory?
Keep your socks on.
I love that.
You need to keep your socks on. Yeah, and you don't want to get. It's like going into another room. That's the best way I could describe it. So you have your frame of reference, which is your room, and you go into someone else's sort of emotional and narrative place, and you walk around very gently, like you would if you went into a china shop. You go you tread very lightly. That's one of the things as a takeaway, I think. Tread lightly when you're working empathically with somebody. But you need to be able to find the door back to your own world, because you don't want to leave the therapy session and not be able to re-engage with your world and your room. And that sometimes happens. I had a colleague many years ago who was working with a client and just couldn't get their frame of reference out of their head, and he had to do a quick march to supervision a day later for the supervisor to lead them out and lead them back into their world. They were just so taken with what the client was saying.
That's it. It's the importance of those safety socks and realizing this is the client's information that they're bringing. But it is our job to submerge ourselves in that and see it and try and perceive it as the client does. Carl Rogers speaks a lot about empathy. He recognizes it as one of the necessary and sufficient conditions of needs to be there. You have to have empathic understanding. And Carl Rogers recognizes empathy as being a circle, in that empathy is pretty useless unless the client is able to perceive at some level that you do understand them. And the way I think of this is, we can connect empathically with a character in a film. You can go and you can watch a film and you can be moved emotionally, either to joy and elation when they win the race, or you can find yourself with tears rolling down your cheeks and you're empathically connecting to their story. But it is worthless empathy because it lives only in the frame of reference of the viewer. We're not able to communicate that back in any way. So for empathy to be effective within a counseling relationship, we need to be able to I guess, give over that understanding that we get it, so that the client goes, somebody hears me, somebody understands. And I guess that is the circle of empathy that makes it effective in counselling.
Well, yeah, and Rogers wasn't immune to that. He spoke very eloquently about it. A quote from his book, A Way of Being, page 10, and he said, "When a person realizes he has been deeply heard, his eyes moisten. I think in some real sense, he is weeping for joy. It is as though he was saying, 'Thank God someone heard me. Someone knows what it's like to be me.'"
Oh, listen to the power. Power of that, the words of Carl Rogers. So there is kind of a taster of a definition of empathy, why it is important in the counselling relationship. How might we show that we empathically understand it? If it's so important for that circle to be complete, what do we do as counsellors other than go, yeah, okay, I hear you, because that's not really that full showing of empathy? What techniques, what can we do, Rory?
Well, first of all, we look like we're listening.
Yes.
So that's the key thing.
Not only do we look like, but we actually are.
We actually are. Well, I think initially we set ourselves up so the client, at least at some level, can say that, yes, and see that we are attending to them. So that's the first skill, attending, making sure that they realize that our full attention is on them. That's the first stage of it, I think. And also I think it's in the reflection and the paraphrasing. So reflection is reflecting emotions, and paraphrasing is condensing what the client said and reflecting back to them what they said. So there's two parts there. There's the emotional content, which is really important because the client can feel heard, not just think they've been heard, and also accurate reflecting back, so that the narrative of what they're saying is they can actually pick it up and say, yes, that's exactly how it is. And I don't speak about my practice too much, but I can say that through the years when I've been reflecting back, people say, yes, that's it, that's exactly how it is. That's exactly, that's it, and occasionally if I'm misattuned to a client, they may say, no, it's not like that, in which case, so tell me a little bit more, and I try and kind of match myself up to it. So yeah, that's the two key skills I think here is reflecting, paraphrasing, and of course initially, to be able to get the information, the most underused skill, silence.
I like it. And you're 100% right. It's in that attending, in that being there, in the way you present yourself, in your body language, in your the expression on your face, that warm acceptance, and really accepting that client, listening to them and being there. And as you say, Rory, I mean, a reflection, you're basically a true reflection is the client's exact words said back to them. And what I hear you saying there, Rory, it's about looking for the emotion words and reflecting them back. So they may say something along the lines, here's just an example pulled out of thin air, whenever he does that, he makes me really angry because he does it again and again and again. And the narrative is that he does something again and again and again. but the emotion is, he makes me really angry. And that's the bit that we might reflect back. We reflect back those emotions, and you're 100% right. It strikes that chord, and the client goes, yes, somebody hears me. Because how often has the client maybe spoken to a friend about stuff that troubles them, and they're given advice or sympathy? Oh, that must be so terrible for you. So those are excellent examples, Rory. And I like what you said there, that when we are maybe paraphrasing and maybe take a slightly wrong step and get something slightly wrong, where we see that we're not within the client's frame of reference, means we're outside of that empathy warmth, I guess, the empathy glow. There's the opportunity for the client to let us know, so we can step back in. As you said, the client will go, no, maybe it's not like that, it's like this, and we can realign that frame of reference and be back within that empathy glow. Absolutely fantastic. It really is. And I guess empathy, to take it to the more advanced stage, we speak about idiosyncratic empathy. And all that means, idiosyncratic basically means unique or different. And that empathy will be unique and different as your clients are unique and different. And in one session, you may find yourself laughing with a client with joy that the tears roll. And in another session, you may find yourself in the depths of sadness, sharing moments with a client. And that is idiosyncratic. It changes depending on who sits in front of you, and that's okay. It's not just a one-size-fits-all something that we put on and project out.
No, and it separates us. I think the use of those, sometimes called core conditions, those three: empathy, congruence, unconditional positive regard. In terms of empathy, I think it separates us from our colleagues in other helping professions, because we're really trying to understand. We're not trying to fix or advise or do anything other than just try and be with the client, hear what they're saying. And as Roger's said, the client can go away and think someone else knows what it's like to be me. Oh. Big difference, I think.
There you have it. There is the subject of empathy. If you're writing about empathy in an assignment, refer to this podcast. You can refer to counsellingtutor.com. We have an amazing article that we have on empathy that really goes in depth, with a whole video over 40 minutes of Carl Rogers speaking about empathy. It's actually called Carl Rogers on empathy, and you can find that by going to counsellingtutor.com. Use our big search function, which allows you to search all of our resources, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. Put in the word empathy, and that's going to come up for you, and you can go and have a look at that. And there's even a little download, a little handout that you can grab from that. And I'm just going to end also with a bit of a quote from Carl Ransom Rogers. We think we listen, but very rarely do we listen with real understanding, true empathy. Yet listening of this very special kind is one of the most potent forces of change that I know, from the man himself. Wow. Moving away from empathy, and I guess empathy is something that is consistent in the stages in counselling. It's something that we continuously strive to, show, feel, be present with. But the stages of counselling vary. From a client coming in is hopefully different to a client who may be leaving. They may be at a different stage, and there's different things we do at different stages in counselling, and that's what you're going to be speaking about today. So without any further ado, let's get straight into Practice Matters.
Practice Matters.
It may come as a bit of a surprise to some that there are stages in a counselling relationship. And the reason for that is there are defined pieces of work that need to be done for the arc of therapy to take effect and for counselling to kind of get underway. The initial stage is contracting. This is important because it gives the client an opportunity to see what the counsellor has to offer, times and durations of the appointments, as well as the limits to confidentiality. Other aspects of contracting include how to make a complaint, how a client can access their notes, and exploring what issues the client wants to bring. The contracting stage also addresses an important ethical consideration, that of autonomy, in the ethical idea that a client can make an informed choice to what they're embarking on. One final observation on contracting is that it addresses, to some extent, the power imbalance within the counselling relationship. And if you think about it, usually clients go to a counsellor's office,
Usually that's at the time that the counsellor set. The counsellor has set appointments for a set time, and in time-limited therapy for a set duration. So there's an awful lot of power stacked up on the side of the counsellor. So having a contract really does address that power imbalance. And also, in my experience, it builds trust. Having a contract and starting on a professional basis means that the client can feel secure that they're working with a professional person, someone who takes the work seriously. And if something goes wrong, they can go back to the contract to redress a complaint or to make an observation about the kind of service that they've had from a counsellor. In the middle stages of counselling, the relationship is where the therapeutic work is carried out. During this time, the client discusses and explores the difficulties they're facing, and with support of the counsellor can either find acceptance or explore making changes. I think it's useful to understand that during this time where the work's being carried out, clients may just come to accept the situation they're in. They may not wish to change it, or conversely, they can talk about how they may make changes and do things differently. For some clients, though, just being heard, believed and accounted for can be hugely therapeutic. And in my experience, just someone listening and taking account of somebody and really believing what they say can just be so useful, certainly for clients who've been ignored or abused or even just kind of neglected. Just having someone to speak with and just being heard and kind of feeling the humanistic love from one person to another can be very powerful and very kind of healing. The final stage is a preparation for endings. Now, this is usually discussed in fixed term engagements. So a fixed term engagement would be where you have maybe 6 or 12 sessions, and it would be good practice to make the client alert to how many sessions are on offer. That would be in the contract. And also talk about, as you get in, say, halfway point in therapy, to just remind them that they've only got so many sessions left. And there's a very good reason for that. And that is because you don't want a client to come in for what is the last session and they don't know about it. And you say, well, this is the final session. It could leave them in a very kind of difficult place. So always counting down the sessions, certainly with fixed engagements. It also might be that it becomes clear when both parties, when the client is ready to disengage from the relationship. And in my experience, sometimes clients will come in and say, I haven't got anything to talk about. And that is usually a precursor to asking the question, where do you think you are in the counselling and how many sessions do you think you might need? And usually just by asking that incites a permission for clients to say, well, to be honest, I don't think I need any more, in which case you can undertake an ending. As I said, preparation for endings is usually highlighted by the counsellor about halfway through the engagement as a way of signifying that at some point therapy will end and both parties will part company. Preparation for endings can include a discussion on the work done, what needs to be looked at and acknowledged, and an acknowledgement of the journey taken. So sometimes it's about the counsellor highlighting the changes that the client's made and how far they've come. And it could also be an opportunity to map support or to make a referral so the client is prepared for the journey ahead. So it might possibly be, and certainly in fixed session therapy, that the client identifies they need support. Now, if this is the case, then a number of options, if possible, can be offered to the client by the counsellor. And if those are taken up, then a referral can be made, and it should be seamless. It should be that a referral's made and either the client can contact the supporter, the person who's offering the support, maybe some group therapy work or an emotional group, or where I used to work at mine, there was lots of courses and lots of kind of activities that could support the clients after therapy. So it might be they made their own appointment for that, or you made an appointment on their behalf. But a really good ending is really important. And it's one of the things that is complained about the most. I believe that in terms of ethical standards, clients not knowing it's a final session is one of the most complained about things. So always prepare and plan for an ending. And that is the stages in counselling.
Thank you as always, Rory. Absolutely first-class stuff. And again, those stages in counselling are covered in assignments, even right up to advanced levels where you're asked in case studies what stage in counselling a client might be at. And Rory has a super-duper handout, as you always do, Rory. You always provide one of those for us, and it is aptly named Stages in Counselling. How do you get that? Well, it's so simple. You go to our website. It's counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcasts tab. You'll find that in the main menu right at the top. And go to episode 72. That's today's episode. All of the notes for today's episode are there, including all links that we've spoken about. And you can directly download your super duper handout from Rory, the stages in counselling, from that page. So go take a look. But moving on to immediacy. What is immediacy?
Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting skill. Sometimes it's listed as a skill.
Yeah.
And immediacy really is the therapist's way of investigating or being curious about what's going on in the relationship. So immediacy is where you may be working with a client and something comes up within you. Maybe a good feeling. It may be something that is maybe bothering you, and you just voice it. And there's a difference, and I want to say this right at the beginning, between being judgmental and being curious about what's going on. So I'll give you an example. I work with a lot of female clients, predominantly have a lot of female clients, and certainly with what's going on in the wider world that's being reported, and the Me Too movements and this type of thing. I'm very thoughtful about how women may, engage with a male therapist. So, if someone is speaking about something that can be really intimate, I might just say, I wonder how it feels to speak to a man about that. And as a way of bridging the humanity between myself and the client. And it can also be a time where you really kind of question contradictions. So it might be that a client says one thing and then 5 minutes later says something else. And counselling is about helping the client be as honest with themselves as they can. So it might be, I gave an example of off air to Ken, where you might get a client who says, well, I've not used drugs for ages and ages. And then they say in the next 5 minutes, I used something on Friday. And, an immediate reaction was, well, you said that you hadn't used for a little while, but actually you said that you had on Friday. And it's about bringing a sense of reality, I think. It can be revealing how I am as a counsellor, what the feeling is in me, sharing a hunch maybe, or sharing something that's going on. And I think most crucially, what's going on between myself and the client. So it's very possible sometimes there might be a disconnection between myself and the client. And, we can't have elephants in rooms in therapy. We can't have things that are unsaid, I don't think. So sometimes it's, if it may be that a client is, if we use the analogy of clients who may have used some drugs maybe and said they hadn't, it may be that there's some shame going on for clients. That we work with shame a lot, and sometimes it's useful to say, I wonder what's going on. It might be a client becomes quite defensive with you, and sometimes you say, I wonder what's going on. It's something I've done. Always keeping the dialogue open, keeping the channel of communication open and uncluttered, I think is immediacy, to be honest.
I like that. And immediacy for me, and my understanding, looking at what Carl Rogers speaks about immediacy as being, it's To be honest, it's a little vague in how it's described, immediacy.
Well, Roger's vague.
Wherever, there you go. There's my immediacy. Wherever you look to immediacy for a rock solid definition, because it is something that comes up within the counsellor. So it's interesting because it is slightly stepping out of frame of reference. So we spoke about empathy in the head of this program of being within 100% within the client's frame of reference, only seeing it from their perspective. So anything we would feed back would be from their frame of reference. Immediacy is when you share a little bit of you. You bring something that bubbles up within you. And sometimes it can feel inappropriate. It might feel, I can't put this over. You may even have felt that in sessions in your placement before, where the client may say something or something's happening in the room and something comes up. It's almost like an overwhelming feeling. You want to tell them something or show them something, and you think, ooh, this is risky. And yes, it is. Immediacy can be risky. And Rory, you spoke so well about the stages of counselling, and immediacy would be inappropriate in session 1. You might put some gentle challenge there, but you would be less likely to put immediacy in a relationship that hadn't developed some form of trust, because it can fracture the relationship. And if you have a trusting relationship to underpin that, then immediacy, if you get it wrong, because you can go wrong with immediacy, you don't know whether you're going to get it right.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I can remember a colleague of mine, sadly not with us anymore, and she started the first session with a client many years ago, and the client got a mobile phone out, dialed her husband, and said, "Can you speak to my husband?" And my colleague, she was called Colette, said, "Why don't you switch your phone off and let's just have a conversation about that?" And that's immediacy. Immediacy, you usually see it comes up around boundary issues. Where people may be pushing the boundaries, and a therapist has to be immediate. They have to say what's in them. And I'd point you to Rogers. Rogers, I was laughing earlier saying Rogers vague. Some of the things he said were a bit vague, I think. But if I can say that. He said, and I can't remember where the quote was from, he said, "I don't have to be consistent. I just have to be the thoughts and feelings that are present with me at any given time."
Yes. Oh, I love that.
That's immediacy. That's the core of it, I think.
It is. And I guess we use it. It's an advanced skill, and you kind of preface this by putting in that this is an advanced skill, and it's an advanced skill for a very good reason. You need to have some experience under your belt to know when it is appropriate to use immediacy. It is to be used gently, I guess, or with care, or with wisdom, maybe is a way of saying that, with wisdom. And so an example of immediacy for me, and I'd used this very same example in my book, Basic Counselling Skills, a Student's Guide, when I wrote about immediacy. And it is the example of being in a session and the client is bringing some material, and we're going to make this a male client just for this experiment. The client is bringing some material, and as the therapist, you're looking at the client bringing this, and you just get this overwhelming feeling of the client being like a little vulnerable boy as he's sharing this information. Immediacy is going with it and saying, as you said that, it was almost like it was coming from a small, vulnerable boy. That's immediacy, because it's not based in anything the client may have said or not said. It's based in a hunch, a feeling, something that happened within you as the therapist. It's from your frame of reference. It's that almost spiritual feeling, very difficult to define. And there's two ways that can go. The client could reply and go, "Oh, you know what? That's exactly how it is. You really get me," and it can deepen that relationship. Or they can look at you quizzically and like, I don't know what you're talking about. That is the risk of immediacy. And if you have the trust and the developed relationship, you're able to say, no, it doesn't. It feels like I got that wrong. How was that for you? And you can go back into their frame of reference.
Yeah. And I think the wisdom that you speak of, Ken, is that of understanding how the relationship is, how deep the therapeutic alliance is.
Yeah.
And, Patricia Clarkson talked about the transpersonal relationship, this kind of spiritual connection, very, very difficult to define, that you have with the client. It's one of those things that we intuitively know when it happens, but very, very difficult to quantify. And the reason it's an advanced skill, it usually is at practice level. And it usually is as the relationship has matured, that, it can happen in early sessions. But I was just thinking of something that happened in my practice recently, and a piece of immediacy I used, and I couldn't have used it very, very early on in the relationship because the relationship wasn't mature enough. A little bit like any relationship we have, we wouldn't be immediate with someone we've just met, maybe, but once we've understood the relationship and understand how they may receive it, I think that's key.
Yes.
Then we can use that particular skill, but it is an advanced skill. And I think, and I'm going to put my neck on the block here, it's probably one of the last skills that students learn.
Yeah, agreed. And it's a tricky skill to practice. It's a tricky skill to practice in a simulated skill session because it is unlikely to be the right environment to bring up that immediacy. So it is likely that you may start feeling those feelings of immediacy within yourself when you are actually out there in placement with your clients. And then there is the question, what do you do when that comes up for you? Do you dare share it? And I'm going to say, go for it. Go for it. Go and find, what was it Roger says that towards the end, he was saying, the more I'm fully just myself, the more I'm seeing the movement in my clients. Don't quote me on that because that is so far away from the actual quote that he said. That's what I took from it. But go for it. Go risk it. Go and risk it and put it out there and see what it does in those relationships. It's a wonderful, magical thing, immediacy. Very difficult to describe. I don't know if we described it adequately here, Rory.
Well, I'm not sure either, Ken. Yeah. That's my immediate reaction. But what you know when it works,
Yes.
When you're with the clients and you use that immediate reaction, when it works. And I have a little perceptual filter, so that when this kind of idea comes through, I run it through this very quickly through this filter, and that filter just does a switch saying, is this my stuff or is this connected to the client?
Yes.
So it's connected to our old friend, which we'll look at in another episode. I've looked at it in lots of episodes. Transference.
Yeah, we're going to have to rename this the Counselling Tutor Transference Podcast because it does come up in about every episode, but it comes up in every counselling session. It's that hey ho, it is the way of things. Wow, what a journey, and it kind of all seemed to link together today. Episode 72, Counselling Tutor Podcast. We spoke about empathy, that understanding it through the client's frame of reference, looking a little bit at self-concept there as well, going through the stages of counselling and then ending with that advanced skill, immediacy that we may only dare to try when the relationship is built, looking at stages in counselling. It's been a really good, well linked together episode. We really hope that you've got something from this. Please visit our website, counsellingtutor.com. There are just such a ton of resources for counselling students. Student of counselling psychotherapy, get to counsellingtutor.com and use our search engine. We've got a little search bar on the front page. Put in what you're looking for and it will return back that subject for you. Get into the Facebook page. Just go to Facebook, Counselling Tutor, knock on our door. We will let you in. It's been awesome. It's been awesome.
Yeah. Well, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care. If you enjoy the topics and handouts here on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, then you will love the Counselling Study Resource. CSR was built by myself, Ken, and Rory Lees-Oakes to give you the support you need during your counselling studies. So get access to the world's most comprehensive collection of resources aimed at supporting you in your journey to become a counsellor. Take the stress out of your studies by visiting counsellingtutor.com/CSR. That's counsellingtutor.com/CSR.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.